This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, special prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. We have a very, very important show. It's very important because things have happened this week which are being misinterpreted, particularly in the media, because the media wants to present an image that there's movement here, that we're going forward with regard to an investigation of how the witch hunt of Robert Mueller began, the Steele dossier, Fusion GPS. This is the way that the media, particularly cable news networks like Fox News, attract viewers and attract listeners. Now, it's understandable to be enthusiastic. It's understandable to be an optimist. Larry Klayman, yours truly, is an optimist, or I wouldn't do what I do. I wouldn't have founded Judicial Watch in 1994, and I wouldn't have founded Freedom Watch after I ran for the U.S. Senate in Florida. But we have to be realists here. And the issue, as Thomas Jefferson would have phrased it, is that the American people need to take justice into their own hands. Last week, I talked about Wyatt Earp, a famous marshal in the Old West, who had to break the law to enforce the law. I'm not advocating that, but this was the Wild West. We're, in effect, living in the Wild West in today's world in Washington, D.C., the swamp. So this week, the Attorney General of the United States, Bill Barr, has done some good things. He put his foot down with regard to Robert Mueller's investigation. Excuse me, I'm getting choked up. And stopped that investigation. That was good. But what he's doing right now in appointing John Durham, this U.S. attorney from Connecticut, to look into the origins of the Mueller investigation, to look into Fusion GPS, to look into the Steele dossier and all these related issues, the surveillance of the Trump campaign. You have to remember, he is a career prosecutor. He came up the line by scratching the backs of people that could advance his career. Now, he had to take on some tough cases, but in the end, for instance, the Whitey Bulger case, who was a dual FBI mafia informant, much like I encountered with Peter Paul, we've talked about that, he burned a lower-level FBI agent. He did not go after the top. He did not go after Robert Mueller, and that's what's at stake here. You see, Mueller sat on that Whitey Bulger investigation at the time. He was not only FBI director, he was involved with the Department of Justice. And other things which he's done, too, have not gone after the higher-ups. Now, the reason that Barr appointed him is because Barr is pushing back on the Democrats. He's pushing back on Gerald Nadler. He's pushing back on Adam Schiff. He's pushing back on Maxine Waters, on Nancy Pelosi. He's saying, if you want to gore my ox, if you want to try to destroy me, I will have within my power the ability to destroy you. But we know, in terms of past history, I've been doing this for almost 30 years, that the establishment in Washington, in the end, protects itself. It does not bring about justice. It'll burn some lower-level people. It'll do that. I'm getting choked up again. Excuse me. I've got post-nasal drip. I'm getting so upset over this whole thing. But this is the way it works in Washington, D.C. You don't go after the higher-ups. The Republicans and the Democrats, they continue to cash in at the great money trough there, at the power, etc. Go on Fox News, go on CNN, go on MSNBC, do your thing. Get reelected, raise money, do what you want. But in the end, there's no justice. And that's why the American people need to do it for themselves. And that's what Thomas Jefferson and our founding fathers did, going back in the years leading up to 1776 in the Revolution. They didn't ask King George to do his job. They didn't ask the Ministry of Justice in England to do the job of the colonialists. They did it themselves, and they did it. They did it well, and that's what we do at Freedom Watch. Now, we have on our website a petition to appoint Larry Klayman special counsel. Note that Barr did not appoint a special counsel. He's keeping control over what Durham does. That, in and of itself, will tell you that this is being used for tactical purposes. So I don't want the people to be fooled. I mean, you can turn on Hannity every night. I watch him for about 3 minutes before I listen to his monologue, which is the same thing every night. Or I see Sarah Carter, who says virtually the same thing every night. Someone who, because she gets on TV, loves new scandals. I don't love new scandals. I want to end scandals. I don't want to have any more. I want to bring these people to justice and make sure that we set an example, that there's no more corruption to this level. There's always going to be corruption. In world history, there's been corruption, but nothing like we've seen under the Obamas, under the Clintons, under others in our government, even under George W. Bush, okay? This is nonpartisan. It's not an issue of one party or another. So this is why Larry Klayman and Freedom Watch are proactive. This is why we are your Justice Department. And I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. Sign up for our Justice League. Donate to our cause. We are the mouse that roared. We need to get bigger. The difference between Judicial Watch Today, getting documents, that's great. Get documents, go on TV, ask the government to do your job, get down on your knees like Fitton does and say, please, let's start investigations. No, we can't do that. We have to bring hard-hitting cases. We have to bring our citizens' grand juries to hold the guilty accountable ourselves under the rule of law, as Wyatt Earp did back in the Old West. I'm not saying that we violate the law. No, we adhere to the law. It's the people's law. So we will indict, we will convict, we will sentence, we will ask the president to carry out those sentences. And if he does not do that, we will peacefully and legally seek to carry them out ourselves. And I'm talking about Robert Mueller. I'm talking about James Comey. I'm talking about Rod Rosenstein. I'm talking about the Lovebirds. I'm talking about McCabe. I'm talking about Bruce Orr and Nellie Orr. And, of course, I'm talking about John Brennan, James Clapper, the intelligence czars under Obama and the Clintons themselves. Those citizens' grand juries are going to be starting in the next few weeks. Watch what we do. I've had to put them off a little bit because I have to fight fires in the meantime with all these different cases. And let me tell you what I've been doing this week, because this is sometimes what diverts me, because I have to keep these cases moving along to a conclusion. We filed a lawsuit with regard to Ilhan Omar, that radical Muslim, vehement anti-Semite, anti-Christian, anti-Israeli congresswoman on Capitol Hill. And her colleague, Rashida Tlaib, who this week made statements saying that she has a calming feeling about the Holocaust. There are others up there as well that are similar to that. But with regard to Omar, she's committed immigration fraud. She married her brother to get him citizenship. She cavorts with terrorist-related groups like CARE. She is, in fact, you call it a Manchurian candidate. I would call it a Muslim candidate. Both begin with an M, that has been implanted inside of the Congress. And how did that happen? Because Obama sent hordes of Sudanese immigrants to this part of Minnesota. They vote for her. And the Jewish left, you know, I'm a proud Jewish Christian, okay? I'm a Zionist. Okay, so I'm not denigrating my own people, because my own people aren't like this. But the Jewish left actually helped elect her. They sowed the seeds of the destruction of the Jewish people in Israel. And they helped elect Tlaib in Minnesota. I mean, the stupidity of these people is unbelievable. So I had to take action myself on behalf of Freedom Watch. We filed a complaint before the Department of Homeland Security asking for an investigation of Ilhan Omar's immigration fraud, a hearing, and if it bears out, criminal referral for prosecution and deportation of Ilhan Omar from the United States. Now, characteristically, remember, who controls the Department of Homeland Security today? President Trump does, but the poor guy is so besieged in every level, he can't keep a track of everybody in terms of what they're doing at these agencies. So DHS sat on this. So what did Freedom Watch do? We didn't sit around sending document requests. We filed a lawsuit in federal court in Washington, D.C. to have a court order that this investigation, prosecution, and deportation proceed. Now, it's ironic and unbelievable that Omar this week came out with a position that the United States should stop deporting people. Okay, well, she's the one that should be deported. Let's get her out of here, because this woman is a threat, not just to Jews, not just to Israel, but to the entire United States and the vision of our founding fathers. She violated the law. She needs to go. Now, also this week, we filed a motion for reconsideration. This is Larry Klayman in his private capacity. I represent Chief Justice Roy Moore in a case against Sacha Baron Cohen for defaming him, for portraying him as a pedophile on his show, Who is America, for which Hollywood was happy to nominate him for a Golden Globe, because they don't care. They don't care about ethics. They don't care about morality. They don't care about honesty. They just want to sell things. They want to make money at the expense of the American people and Judge Moore. Well, this case came in front of a judge who I thought would be a decent judge, Judge Thomas Hogan, appointed by Reagan. And he sent the case from his courtroom in Washington, D.C. to New York City. New York City, the bastion of immorality and leftist thinking. And this was done despite the fact that the release which Judge Moore signed was obtained under fraudulent circumstances. So I moved for reconsideration, and I moved to disqualify Judge Hogan because at the outset of the hearing that we had a few weeks ago, he disparaged and disrespected Judge Moore, asking me whether he was still Chief Justice of the Alabama Supreme Court. You know that a judge is always called judge even after he ceases his judgeship role. So we're moving ahead with that. And then with regard to Sheriff Arpaio, and I'll get into that in the second segment as well, we filed an opposition to a motion for Gerald Nadler, Eric Swalwell, the dumbest white man in Congress, I might add, and others who tried to intervene in that case and are saying that the pardon of Sheriff Joe Arpaio should be set aside and he should be given prison time for a misdemeanor in terms of alleged racial profiling in day worker sites. Now, where are you going to find illegal aliens if you don't go to day worker sites? I'll be right back. We're going to have more of what Freedom Watch has been doing on behalf of the American people.
Fearless.
He's claiming he's crazy, he's racist, he's out to kill the Democrats.
Dangerous.
You don't care, he uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Continuing with the Arpaio story, it's unbelievable that for political purposes, Gerald Nadler, an individual who is less than honest, he's a complete, frankly, scumbag. I remember during the days of the Chinagate investigation how he tried to cover up for Bill Clinton. Eric Swalwell wants to be president, but frankly doesn't know where he is half the time. He looks like Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. And others, 18 other Democrats, intervene. Frankly, it's none of their business with regard to the pardon that President Trump issued for our brave and heroic client, Sheriff Joe Arpaio. And what they're saying is the president doesn't have the power to pardon. So I went into court and I said, look, I'm having to respond to this on behalf of Sheriff Arpaio. This is completely frivolous. It's non-meritorious. It's a political hatchet job for public relations purposes. I want these representatives to actually pay my attorney's fees for having to intervene on behalf of Sheriff Arpaio. I want them reprimanded by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And I want, because most of these representatives are lawyers, I want complaints forwarded by the court to Barr disciplinary councils in states where they're licensed to have them sanctioned for this kind of conduct. See, this is what's going on in the courts these days. And these judges at a lower court level, you can guess with almost exact certainty, based on who appointed them, how they're going to rule. This judge in Arizona that found Sheriff Arpaio liable for a misdemeanor, Susan Bolton, is a leftist hack. Now, that notwithstanding, she wouldn't even give Sheriff Arpaio a jury trial and wouldn't set aside her finding even after the president pardoned Sheriff Arpaio. So Sheriff Arpaio went to the Ninth Circuit and said, vacate that finding. I've been pardoned. The president has said I did nothing wrong. There was not sufficient evidence to convict me of anything. And, the Ninth Circuit is now considering that issue. But what business is it of these Democrats other than to try to destroy the president of the United States? They don't like his immigration policies. They don't like anything else about him. They've got to use my client, Sheriff Arpaio, America's toughest sheriff, as the whipping boy. Well, see, this is why we have to fight back ourselves. Jerry Corsi, my other brave client, I have many brave clients. I don't represent clients I don't believe in. Okay, I won't do it. I don't have the time to do it. I will never do it. Only if I believe in someone will I take up the cause. Dr. Corsi stood up to Robert Mueller. He said, I'm not going to lie under oath to implicate the president, even if you offer me a sweetheart plea deal where I'll do no time. And that was what was offered. Plead guilty to 1 count of perjury. You won't have to do time. Others took that. General Flynn took that. George Papadopoulos did that, took that. Others took that. But Jerry said, no, I'm not going to lie. I won't lie in front of my creator. I'll risk life imprisonment if I have to. He's already 72 years old. If he'd gotten 10 years, that would have been it. And we succeeded on his behalf. I succeeded on his behalf. We successfully defended him. How do we do that? Because we pushed back against Mueller. We made him pay the price, potentially. I filed a lawsuit against Mueller for violating the constitutional rights of Jerry Corsi, of attempting to obstruct justice, of attempting to tamper with witnesses. Jerry did nothing wrong. Jerry played it straight. He wasn't like Roger Stone. He didn't threaten witnesses. He didn't lie to Congress. He told everything truthfully. That's why Stone was indicted, and Corsi was not. And this is the reality of what we face today, is that we ourselves, we the people, we need to stand up like Wyatt Earp. We need to stand up like our founding fathers. We need to do it for ourselves. I'm tired of watching people push it off to our so-called Justice Department and other organs of government to do the job that we the people must do. Read the Declaration of Independence. Read our Constitution. We have those powers. And Justice Scalia himself in 1992, as I've said many, many times, United States versus Williams said the grand jury belongs to the American people, doesn't belong to the other two branches of government. We can indict. We can try. We can convict. We can sentence. We didn't have a Justice Department until 1870. We had to do it for ourselves. We need to go back to that. And while Bill Barr, our Attorney General, did a good thing in ending the Mueller probe, all he's really doing right now is creating a catch-22, a mutual assured destruction. He's saying, get off my back or I'll take you out. And that's the way it works in Washington, and everybody will walk away. Maybe a couple lower-level people will get burned, but we're not going to have justice at the higher-ups. Now, I'm going to be back with my good friend David Marconi, an A-list Hollywood film writer, an individual who knows the truth, who believes, like me, that the government does not tell you the truth. And we're going to be talking about UFOs, unidentified flying saucers, which do exist, but the government's been hiding that from us for years. The American people need to know more about it. So I'll be right back with David Marconi, and listen carefully to what we have to say.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
I'm here with my very good friend, an A-list Hollywood film writer, someone extremely talented. I've known David for quite a while. David Marconi is his name. He has written the script of The Enemy of the State with Will Smith and Gene Hackman. Recently, The Foreigner. He's working on other projects. He's one of the most talented people I know in Hollywood. But more important than that even is the fact that David understands that the truth is important, that the American people need to know the truth, and that the government does not tell us the truth. And I brought him here today, and he kindly agreed to appear to discuss his experience with unidentified flying objects, what he knows about them, and what the American people need to know about the individuals and aliens that are here in the world that are not harmful to us, but in fact have been surveilling us for many, many years. Dave, welcome to Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. The American people need to understand the truth of what's out there. They don't need to be afraid. but they need to really get all the truth. The government's been holding it back from us. And then recently, of course, the military has said that pilots are able now to file reports of what they see without retribution, these Air Force pilots and Navy pilots. But still, the government's going to hold back on that information. So I thought it'd be really good for you to disclose to the American people your experience with unidentified flying objects, and people like Stephen Greer, who have followed this issue and have investigated it for many years.
I mean, what is the truth? I mean, that's like peeling away the onion skin. I can talk about my personal experiences, which is the truth for me, but I don't really know exactly what the truth is, and I don't know if we ever will, at least, in my lifetime. But I saw my first craft probably when I was 12 years old, and I've been seeing them repeatedly since then. I believe that there's actually two space programs that are afoot here. There's like NASA, which many people say stands for Never a Straight Answer. And then there's the actual military program that's run, what I believe is by the military-industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about in his farewell address to the nation. I think that a lot of these technologies, a lot of the craft that we see flying, in the sky right now, I mean, they're appearing much more, because everyone has, high-res cell phones. So we're seeing a lot more of these things, and people are also now starting to go into space. And I believe that some of these are ours. I mean, you have the F-117 that's suddenly been retired because the technology is no longer appropriate. You have we have secret programs where I believe we're developing a lot of these craft. Ben Rich, who ran Skunk Works, he has a very famous quote, said that we now have the ability to take ET home. We have technologies that are beyond anything that the American public is aware of, but they're not being told about these technologies. We have anti-gravity, we have free energy. Private scientists have also been able to master some of this stuff, but we're not being told about this stuff, because to be told about this stuff, we would displace a multi-trillion-dollar industry, basically the petroleum business. So these technologies could change life on this planet, within a matter of 20 years. It would revolutionize transportation, revolutionize our entire lives, but to come out with this information would destroy the power base and the powers that be. And, who knows what it would do to religion and everybody else. But the petroleum industries and the military-industrial complex would take a severe hit if this technology, free energy and anti-gravity, were to be released. So we're being kept from these technologies. I believe they've had these technologies since the 50s, and they're being withheld from the American public because of a cabal of greed and power.
What about the possibility of people from other solar systems or creatures or whatever you want to call them, aliens here on Earth? There have been sightings recently by the Air Force pilots themselves and others. What's the possibility of that?
Well, I believe this planet's been visited before mankind was even here. I mean, if you can imagine what a technological society would be like that's even 100 years more advanced than us, let alone a technological society that's 1,000 years more advanced than us, or one that's 1,000,000 years more advanced than us. I mean, and they view us, this is my thoughts, is that they view us, they have no ill intention. If they did, we would have been gone long ago. Nor do they want to interfere with what we're doing. But they are, however, very concerned about, weapons being put into space and, nuclear bombs and all those things that can do damage not only to, our home planet, but, you start putting nuclear weapons and space weapons into space, we become a threat not only to ourselves, but to, the universe. We are kind of like the apes of the universe in the way that we go about and settle our conflicts with guns and knives and everything else. I believe advanced, civilizations have moved beyond the realm of conflict and have universal good intentions. And Stephen Greer has developed ways to tap into this through meditation and telepathy. A lot of other people in the past have done this. You can look up Ingo Swann, who also came out of a program, SRI, that was run by the CIA, and through remote viewing and a lot of these other techniques, you're able to reach out and have experiences. So it's been very interesting. I've attended several of Dr. Greer's expeditions where craft appear, and they're basically they have peaceful intentions, and through meditation and other techniques, we've captured them on film, on video. It's been an amazing experience, and it really kind of opens up your eyes. I tend to keep it on a personal level. It's not really something I, talk to outside of, the realm of my friends. But it's been a very kind of amazing experience for me.
What did you observe at some of these events? Tell us a little bit more about Stephen Greer, too. I've met him. You and I went to the premiere of one of his films, Unacknowledged, a few years ago. Very impressive guy, someone who's very sincere. He's not a grandstander. But tell us, what you know about Stephen Greer, how you got to know him, and what you observed at these events, specifically.
Well, I got to know him because, when you see something as a young child and it goes against, the realm of, what you're being told officially, you start to look for answers. Again, I'm referring to the first, ET craft I saw when I was like 12. And, it wasn't swamp gas. It wasn't, a weather balloon or any of those other ridiculous things they try to convince you of. It was a craft, and I saw it with 5 other people, and it was, moving across the sky in broad daylight. So I started from an age of 12. I was always starting to research, this kind of stuff. And I realized, this was like the first great conspiracy that I myself, I felt I uncovered. And then that led me to, other conspiracies. I mean, they're like dogs. Suddenly you notice them and they're everywhere. So it was an interesting experience for me, and I found Stephen Greer and I started watching his stuff. He had originally done something called Project Disclosure, where he got a lot of these former military people. I think there's about 300 or 400 interviews on the internet, and he got a lot of these former military people to come forward and start talking about the unacknowledged projects that they were working at. They're called USAPs, which stands for Unacknowledged Special Access Programs, where a lot of the alien tech that had been captured was reverse engineered, and then the stuff dribbled out to the American public through the various technological companies. But the companies that have been heavily involved in this are like Raytheon, Bobby Inman, Lockheed. These are the people that are reverse engineering this stuff and controlling the technologies. And it was a very eye-opening experience to watch all these interviews with these former military people who had impeccable credentials come forward and start talking about reverse engineering of craft. I mean, there's a book called The Day After Roswell by Major General Corso, I believe, where he comes out and says, these are the programs we were doing, and these were the craft we recovered, and this was the reverse engineering we did on these stuff. And it was very kind of eye-opening in that sense. And so I watched this, and Greer was able to get a lot of these people to step forward, because even though they signed these heavy-duty non-disclosure agreements with the government, they couldn't, if they started talking about it, they really couldn't be prosecuted, because to prosecute them, there would have to be a court of law, and the government would have to come out and acknowledge the types of projects they were working on that they were somehow compromising. So all the government could do once these people again, I'm not saying the government, but all that could happen to these people is they could be discredited, and they could be ridiculed, and they could be, made fun of, which is a very effective type of, weapon. I mean, that's in Will Smith and, Enemy of the State. They steal away his credibility. So that's in turn what happens to a lot of these people that come out and start talking about what they've seen or some of the secret government programs that are being run. They get ridiculed and destroyed that way. There's also a lot of false narratives in the UFO community that are putting forward false information. So pretty soon it's just you're walking through a field of chaff trying to figure out what's real, what's really happening, and what isn't real. But one of the messages that Stephen Greer pushes a lot is that there is no hostility with these beings or their civilizations. And if anything, they're here to help us. And I truly believe that. And I know that doesn't really fit the military narrative that they want to push. I remember there was a famous quote that Wernher von Braun, a former, Nazi paperclip scientist who had worked for Peenemünde on the V2 projects, and he then later got into the Saturn programs for the U.S. And he said something very prophetic. He said, the U.S. military will push. First, it's going to be the Russians. Then it's going to be the terrorists. Then it's going to be the rogue third world nations. Then it's going to be the asteroid threat. And finally, they're going to drum up the ET threat. And these are going to be the threats that they're going to use to basically push forward their increasing military budget year after year after year, with the ultimate threat being, the ET threat, which is just an absolute bunch of garbage. Again, if they wanted to destroy us with their ray guns, they could have done it, a long time ago.
Well, it's interesting in the context, David. You know what I do. I mean, you followed it for a while. I follow what you do. You wrote Enemy of the State, I reiterate. So you understood that when you created that script and the way they tried to discredit Will Smith and others. But the government rarely tells you the truth. If it's moving its mouth, this is what they say about lawyers, it must be lying. But the American people need to understand that something's out there, something is happening. And you identified two sources of it, our own military programs and technology, but also the technology of people from other systems, or at least entities from other systems. And who's to say, even if they're not manned, that they're not sending unmanned vehicles here like we do to other planets? So to be beaten back and not being able to talk about this for so long, and Air Force pilots, now they can at least have reports without being retaliated against by the military, but they still can't disclose to the American people in full detail what they see.
No, and a lot of, and these reports have, been going on for, history. As long as history's been recorded, there's been reports of star people and star things and, and miracles in the sky. And, and now as technology is able to record this stuff much more instantly, there's going to be a plethora of a tidal wave of information that pretty soon they won't be able to hold back. And once this stuff, comes forward, and and people realize that, the government, the emperor will lose his clothes, and the government won't have their power, and that's what they're frightened of.
Here you've heard it. UFOs do exist, and Freedom Watch is on it. We're following this, and we're looking into it in greater detail. Dave, we're going to have you back at a later time. I want to talk about some of your films, too, because you're really a great writer and a great talent. Thank you for coming on, and God bless you.
Thank you.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Fellow patriots, friends, colleagues, this is the verdict. The verdict is, and you just heard it with regard to UFOs and military programs, that the government does not tell the truth. The government doesn't disclose to the American people. I'll tell you a story. I didn't get to it with David in the prior segment, but 8 years ago, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request. See, we do the same thing that Judicial Watch does now, but then we take it a step further. I filed a request. I asked for information on UFOs on Area 51, which ironically is where Cliven Bundy was imprisoned at Pahrump, and that's where we detonated some atom bombs years ago. There's a huge military base there. When I walked out of the prison one day, a guard was following me, or at least he was side by side with me. And I said, this place is just like Alcatraz, except, you don't have San Francisco Bay. What you've got are rattlesnakes. This is in the middle of the desert. And he said, well, I'm not worried about the rattlesnakes. I see UFOs every night. This was a prison guard who told me that. But 8 years before that, I had filed a Freedom of Information Act request about UFOs, Area 51, mental telepathy, use of this technology for military application. And just a few weeks ago, I finally got the response 8 years later, and it was only about 4 inches thick, and it was mostly in Russian, believe it or not. David's girlfriend, Masha, reads Russian, and we looked at it, and it was what the Russians were doing. The Russians believe this. The British believe in UFOs. They confirm it. Other countries do, but we would never acknowledge it. That's why the title of the book, Unacknowledged, of Stephen Greer. So we're going to be filing a lawsuit to get all the documents because this is important. And it's just as important, maybe even more so than Robert Mueller's investigation or the Clintons or the Obamas. This is the future of the world, and people should not discount that UFOs do exist, and we need to understand fully who is with us and who is amongst us, and whether or not this is something that we need to address as people on this earth. But we're also addressing the justice issues. So I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org. The citizens' grand juries will be starting in the next few weeks. We're going to start with Mueller. We're going to indict Mueller. We're going to indict Rosenstein. We're going to indict McCabe. We're going to indict the Lovebirds. And we're going to go from there because it's not going to be the only citizens' grand juries. We're going to be coming to a hometown near you. And I want to show the American people that we hold the system of justice in our own hands, just like Wyatt Earp did in the Old West. I put up on our website, I wrote a column last week for WorldNet Daily, which is a great publication. It lets me write what I really believe. I was writing for Newsmax too, but they censor a lot of what I write. They won't publish a lot of what I write because they want to take a middle ground position because they're trying to please left and right. I'm not trying to please anybody. Okay, I'm just writing what I believe is true. But I wrote a story which was about the mutual assured destruction in Washington, D.C., how the American people needed to do it for themselves. And I attached in the press release a trailer from the movie Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner. And in that trailer, and I want you to look at it because it's very motivational. Kevin Costner's father, who was a judge, says to him, hold your family close. They're the most important thing. The only thing important after that is the law. And then he says, there are a lot of bad people, Wyatt, out there. This was the Old West. And regrettably, I think there are more bad people today than there were even then. And he says, when you encounter these bad people, shoot first and shoot to kill. Now, I'm not advocating killing anybody. I'm advocating peacefully and legally. But figuratively speaking, that's what we have to do. We have to take the criminals out peacefully and legally. We got to take the Mullers out. We got to take the Rosensteins out. We got to take the Comeys out, the Obamas, the Clintons, the others, before they destroy our country completely. And the irony here is that we likely have aliens from other worlds in our midst who have been peaceful, who are not here to destroy us. But on the other side of the coin, we have people from within our own government who are trying to destroy us. And we need to take care of business peacefully and legally. So go to Freedom Watch USA, support our cause, freedomwatchusa.org. Support the Bundys at CliveandBundyDefenseFund.org. Support our cases for Jerry Corsi, the CorsiLegalDefenseFund.com. We need to mobilize the troops. We need to avoid and prevent being destroyed from within. We're not going to do that with just Freedom of Information Act requests and getting down on our knees and begging the government to do it for us. We must do it ourselves. I'll be back next week with another edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman.